Hey there, and welcome. Today we're going to decode a medical condition that, honestly, often hides in plain sight. It's one of those things that writes its story right on the body itself. So to really get a handle on Cushing syndrome, let's start with the most obvious clues.
Okay, so our investigation really starts with this really strange collection of symptoms. If you look at them one by one, you might think they have nothing to do with each other. But when you put them all together, they point to one single underlying cause.
So picture this. You start to see a face that's getting rounder, fuller, what doctors call a moon face. Then there's weight gain, but it's weirdly specific, mostly around the middle. And on top of that, these deep, kind of angry-looking purple stretch marks. Now, these aren't just random changes your body's going through. No, these are classic, telltale signs that something inside is seriously out of whack.
So, that's the big question, right? What on earth connects all these mysterious symptoms? What single culprit could be causing such a wide, dramatic range of changes? Well, the answer comes down to one powerful hormone that's just gone completely rogue.
And here it is. The culprit we're looking for, the one thing behind all of this, is a hormone called cortisol. But not just any cortisol. We're talking about way, way too much of it. When your body is swimming in excess cortisol for a long time, its systems start to change in some really specific and noticeable ways. So let's put an official name to it. Cushing syndrome is simply the clinical state, that whole collection of signs and symptoms that happens when your body has been exposed to an overload of cortisol. And here's the key. It doesn't matter where that extra cortisol came from.
And this brings us to a really crucial point that trips a lot of people up. You'll hear Cushing syndrome and Cushing disease, and they sound the same, but they're not. Think of syndrome as the big umbrella term for the whole condition. But Cushing disease, that's one very specific cause, a tumor on the pituitary gland. It's a super important distinction to keep in your back pocket.
So how does this all go wrong? Well, to get it, we've got to look at how the body's command chain is supposed to work. Normally, it's this beautifully balanced system. But as we're about to see, it can definitely be disrupted.
Just think of it like a simple three-step chain of command. It all starts in the brain. Step 1, the hypothalamus signals the pituitary gland. Step 2, the pituitary then signals the adrenal glands. Those are the little guys sitting on top of your kidneys. And Step 3, the adrenals get the message and release cortisol. In a healthy body, there's this feedback loop that keeps the whole thing perfectly in check, so you never have too much or too little.
Okay, so here's something that might surprise you. The single most common cause of Cushing syndrome actually comes from outside the body. It's what we call iatrogenic, which is just a fancy way of saying it's caused by a medical treatment. We're talking about people taking steroid medications like prednisone for things like asthma or autoimmune diseases.
But okay, what if it's not from an external medication? Well, sometimes the body's own internal command chain just breaks down. It goes completely haywire. And that leads to what's called endogenous Cushing syndrome, meaning it's coming from inside. So when it's an internal problem, this breakdown can happen in a few different places. The most common one? A benign tumor on the pituitary gland. And remember, that's Cushing disease. Or you could have a tumor right on the adrenal gland itself, just pumping out cortisol with no off switch. And sometimes, in rare cases, a tumor somewhere else in the body can start making the signal hormone, hijacking the whole system.
And the result of all this extra cortisol? Well, it has a massive, system-wide impact on the body. It's what causes that classic truncal obesity in moon face. It makes your skin super thin and easy to bruise. It sends your blood pressure soaring. It weakens your muscles. And it can even push you into developing diabetes. It really touches almost every system.
But out of all those signs, there's one that really makes a doctor's ears perk up. We're talking about those wide purple stretch marks, or stria. See, they're not like the ones you might get from normal weight gain. The ones in Cushing's are usually wider, like more than a centimeter, and they have this really distinct deep red or purplish color. It's a very specific clue about what high cortisol does to the skin.
All right, so once the symptoms are on the radar, the next phase is basically a medical detective story. It's not enough to just say, yep, cortisol is high. Doctors have to figure out why it's high, and just as important, where it's coming from.
And the process for this is super methodical, really logical. Step 1, you have to confirm that cortisol levels are actually high. This is done with tests like a 24-hour urine collection or a late-night saliva sample.
Okay, so once that's confirmed, step 2, you got to figure out the source. Is the problem coming from the pituitary or is it somewhere else? And then finally, step 3, you use imaging like an MRI or CT scan to pinpoint the exact location of whatever's causing the trouble.
So, once the source is found, the final act of this whole story can begin: treatment. The goal is pretty straightforward. Shut off that fire hose of excess cortisol and get the body's delicate hormonal balance back to normal.
Now, what's really important here is that the treatment is tailored directly to the cause. This is not a one-size-fits-all situation. If it's a pituitary tumor, surgeons can often go in through the nose, it's pretty amazing, to remove it. If the problem is an adrenal tumor, then that gland gets removed. And if it's one of those other tumors, well, the focus becomes treating that primary malignancy.
So if you remember nothing else from this, I want you to remember these 5 key things. They are the core constellation of signs for Cushing syndrome: obesity, stria, those purple stretch marks, hypertension, diabetes, and weakness. If you see those things starting to pop up together, it should absolutely raise a red flag.
And let's just end on this thought. All these symptoms, they're not random. They're a form of communication. It's the body telling a story about a serious internal imbalance. The real challenge for everyone involved, patients and doctors, is just learning how to read that story. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.